Hey guys, welcome to video number 6 of 6 on 6 things you need to know to get a band 6 in advanced maths, or otherwise known as just mathematics, for the 2019 exam. Finally, we are looking at loan repayments. So this comes from your topic of series, otherwise known as time payments. The other type of question there are your superannuation style questions where you're investing money. Not as common, they're still important to know, so make sure you look over those, but definitely every HSC, be ready for some form of loan repayment question. I've broken it down into two parts because there are two main style of questions they can ask you. Number one, the most common question they will ask you is finding M, where M is your monthly repayment. The second style, which is more difficult, is you're finding N, where finding N is the number of time periods. So that's where they ask you, okay, how long would it take to pay off something? And I've narrowed it down to just some simple steps here, so you need to remember these. Finding the monthly repayment, you just want to do A1, A2, A3, so what's owing after those three. Then form a pattern for AN. Then it's SN and then 0 equals. And that'll make more sense, those steps, once we do the question. If it's a finding N question, it's a little bit more involved, and I've really simplified down these more complicated steps. So we have start with your AN formula, then we have to times out the denominator, we're going to then expand brackets, we're going to gather like terms, and then we're going to be using logs. Let's start straight away with this HSC question I gathered. It's a good question because it's asking both. Okay, so part 1 is just easing you into it. Part 2 is a finding M, the monthly repayment, and part 3 is finding N, how long something would take. So I've sort of started to map things out just to save a bit of time because it is a lot of writing out. But we have a $360,000 loan. It's to be repaid in monthly repayments of M dollars, which straight away tells me everything must be in months. Over 300 months with a rate of 6% per annum. So you can see over here on the side, the first thing I have done here is turned that per annum into my rate per month. And we have AN being the amount owing still after the nth repayment. So it wants us to find an expression for A2, an easy 1 mark question. So to find an expression for A2, we need to start with A1. Now think about this. A1 is what he owes after 1 month. So he's going to still owe the $360,000. But after 1 month, this is going to be charged interest. Okay? Then, after it's charged interest, he pays some off. So we take off the monthly repayment, which is what we need to find. So that's what he would be owing after 1 month. Now, after 2 months, he's going to be owing what was still left after 1 month. That is going to then be charged more interest, but then he's going to pay off another monthly repayment. So on my next line here, I'm just going to expand this out. So I'm going to just substitute in my A1 in there. So when I do that, I'm going to have this line here. So there it is. I put it in blue there. Now you can see I've just filled in my A1, times it by the rate again, subtracted off my repayment, and I've expanded it in on the second line. Now when you're expanding in, it's just a matter of realizing this whole thing is one term. So when I times that in here, it's going to make that to the power of 2. And then the minus M is a separate term. So I'm going to also multiply that in there, which gives me the negative M lots of that. And then you've got your minus M floating on the end. So there's your 1 mark. Okay, so now we have to show the monthly repayment is that. So this is our M question. Thinking about that summary I made at the start, the steps are A1, A2, A3, AN, SN, so on. So I've gotten to A2. Now I would do the exact same thing. I continue on for part 2 to A3. And you can see down the bottom here, that's what I've been doing. So what I have here is that A3 is just going to be A2 times by my rate again, subtract off a repayment. So then on the next line, I'm just simply going to expand that out, okay? So I've written these steps out already just so you can see it happening to save a bit of time. So here you can see that I've subbed in my A2, then I got my multiplying by 1.005 here, and then my minus m floating on the end is here. So hopefully you can see where everything's coming from. Then it's a matter of multiplying in. Now don't forget, when you multiply in, looking at the different terms. I have one separate term here, another separate term here, and a last separate term there. So when I multiply this in, it's going to times by that, this one, and this one, which gives me my very next line here. So just notice how now my 2 becomes a power of 3. I have minus m lots of 1.005 to the power of 2, minus m lots of 1.005, and then my minus m, once again, just floating on the end from here, bringing down. Okay, once you get to A3, a good thing to do now is just to try and make a line of cleaning things up. So what I've done here is I've noticed, okay, there's a negative m, a negative m, and a negative m in all of these terms. So I factorized out a negative m and then put the remaining in brackets. Now what you can see is this is going to become a series. So we get this plus dot 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 plus 1, okay? So factorizing out that negative m is a good step because now we've established our sequence here that we're going to have to evaluate eventually. All right, after A3 becomes our AN step, okay? So AN is now where we're finding a pattern. We're looking at A1, we're looking at A2, and now A3, and saying, okay, well, is there a pattern that we can see coming up here? And there is, okay? So what you should be able to see is that when we had A1, where our 1.005 had a power of 1. When we had A2, we had a power of 2. When we had A3, we had a power of 3. So now we can say, well, when it's AN, it's going to be power of n. Okay, so whatever value we have, that's our little power. Then the next thing we can notice is, okay, well, when it was let's go to A2, the second term had a power of 1. All right. When it was A3, my second term had a power of 2. So when it's AN, my second term is going to have a power of n minus 1. Which then would keep going if you're adding in more values. So that's how we're going to establish this pattern. And then we get n minus 2 plus dot 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 plus 1. Okay, these are the steps you will always do. So now we've established AN. Let's think about what I said up here. Okay, now we're going to do SN and then 0 equals. So SN is just establishing what this pattern here will be. Okay, so it's a geometric series. All right, and I want to find the sum. So I'm going to use my geometric series formula. Now, there are 2 formulas on your formula sheet for the sum of a geometric series. At the end of the day, it does not make a difference to your answer which one you use. I've just been taught to use this one, and I've always used it, and I just stick with it. If you use the r to the power of n minus 1 over r minus 1 formula, you will still get the exact same answer. I know that some people explain that if r is less than 1, you use one of them. If r is bigger than 1, you use the other. It actually doesn't make a difference which one you use. So when I substitute it in, I show my substitution and I get this big ugly value. Here, I usually store in my memory of my calculator. If you're not sure how to do that though, just write the calculator screen out. Okay, on my next line now, I'm just showing my substitution of that. So my m value, I've just put in here now because I know what that series, that big ugly series, is equivalent to. Now the idea is I'm subbing in my A300 now, okay? So, and that's what I did there. So you can see that's where I got my values because 300 is what we want to know. Well, that's how many months this goes for. And we say, well, what should be owing after 300 months? And it should be nothing because he's supposed to have this paid off in 300 months. So that's how we get this 0 equals because nothing should be owed after 300 months. Now it's just a matter of rearranging for m. So I bring the entire negative m over the other side and I get it as a positive m now. The last thing is that m is timesing by that amount, so then I divide. I throw all that in my calculator and I get what we needed to find the monthly repayment to be. So these steps here you will do every single time you have a finding m question. It's always going to be find A1, find A2, find A3, find AN, sub our N value in, do SN, and rearrange every single time. So please learn that process, okay? The only thing that a HSC exam may do slightly differently is they might say using AN, and they will already give you AN, and that's fine to do. It means it's helping you. You don't have to do the A1, 2, and 3. They can jump straight to giving you what AN is equal to, okay? But know this process and know it well. It's not a difficult process once you see how repetitive it is. Okay, part 2 is finding N. This is a bit more difficult. Let's review my steps. I said start with AN, then multiply out your denominator, expand the brackets, and gather like terms. So I'm going to try and keep that there so you can see the summary while we're going. So AN says, after how many months will the amount owing become less than 180,000? So we keep our M. That's not going to change. They haven't said that M, the monthly repayment, is changing. So always, always, always start with your AN. Whether you found AN in the previous parts or they give you AN formula in the question, write it down and start there. Remember, we want to find N. That's what makes it so difficult. Look how many N's there are, and we have to somehow rearrange this whole thing to get N equals and some number. That's why it's difficult. We need to push all these N's down into just one N. So I've just subbed in my values and shown what it needs to be, because the question asks when will it become less than 180,000. So when will the amount owing, which is all of this, be less than 180,000? So I've subbed in my M value, but N is what we don't know once again. All right, the very first thing I'm going to do, which I haven't necessarily put in here, which I probably should, is SN, okay? Use your SN formula and sub it in, okay? Now remember, we don't know N, so we have to leave it all in terms of N. So there we have it. I just cleaned it up a little bit because 1 multiplying by is just going to be itself, and 1 on minus 1.005, it doesn't have a power, so I can do that subtraction, and I can get negative 0.005. Notice I didn't subtract the top because you cannot subtract the numbers if one of them has a power. You can't do that. So that's my most simplified form. So now I'm just going to rewrite my line now. Instead of this series in it, I'm going to have this value. So there it is. All right, the next step I've written over here is times out your denominator. That's an ugly thing that I don't really like right now, is this denominator. The whole thing is ugly, but that in particular is making things very icky. So I'm going to multiply every single term here, this term, and this term, by negative 0.005. Now, let's think about this. When I'm timesing this term, I can just times my 360,000 by it, which gives me negative 1,800. Then I can multiply this term by it, which is just going to cancel the denominator off. That's the point of multiplying everything by it. It's cancelling itself off. Because dividing by negative 0.005, then multiplying by it will cancel it out. And finally, multiplying my 180,000 by negative 0.005 is going to give me negative 900. Now, I have multiplied by a negative number, which is going to flip my inequality. Okay, so I have now multiplied out my denominator as per this step here. The next step said to expand my brackets. The brackets we are expanding is just going to be this one here. So timesing my negative 2,319.5 by this and this. Now, once again, this second term has a power, so I can't actually multiply the numbers. I can just write them next to each other though. So this is what I'm going to get. Okay, so one thing that I generally do, which I haven't done here, is for inequality questions when they're so ugly like this, one thing you can do is just solve it equal to, and then remember in your last step that it is an inequality. So if the inequality part is confusing you a bit, it's okay to just from here, put it equal to, and just go back at the end and remember that, yes, it is an inequality. All right, now we have expanded out the brackets. Okay, so I've multiplied my 2,319.5 by 1, which just gives me that. Then multiplying it by the second term here, notice I've just written them next to each other. That's got an N, because I can't multiply those numbers. The next thing we have is like terms. So now let's think about like terms. Forget how ugly this is looking. Just think about where we have some form of like term. This is like negative 1800x plus 2319x. So they're like terms. Forget that there's a big ugly part of it. Think of it as just x's. So when I can put them together as they're like terms, I'm just going to have my negative 1800 plus 2319.5. So I get 519 when I take negative 1800 and plus that value. And remember, it's 519 lots of 1.005 to the power of n. The next thing I'm also going to do is take this negative 2,319.5 over to the other side, just because it's a value, and I'm going to add it to my negative 900. Okay, from here, I'm just going to simplify this down. When I simplify, it becomes 1419.5, and since the 519 here was multiplying, I take it over and divide. Okay, so I'm cleaning it up. My last step that I haven't gotten to is log, all right? And the reason we're logging is because we're undoing an exponent here. So I'm going to just log both sides, okay? And that's going to bring my power out the front, which will give me this. Okay, so again, if you can't remember, that is a log law. When we have a power on a log, we can bring it out the front in times, which is then going to just be making this a value. It's multiplying by n. I need n by itself, so I'm going to bring it over and divide. And it looks ugly. I'm just going to throw that straight in my calculator, and I do get a value of 201.7338 ... Now remember, this was an inequality question. My inequality was greater than, so it's when n is going to be greater than that, so therefore when n is equal to 202. So I would write that as a therefore statement. I have run out of room, but please make sure you do, okay? One thing I will just touch on is the calculator work here, just in case you are getting this value, but you're not getting the 201 when you put in your calculator. Calculator work is tricky, but you do get better at it. Something like this, I would put ln bracket my 1419.5 divided by 519, close bracket, press equals. Don't be afraid to press equals a lot. Then you get 1.006, so on. Then I press divide by bracket, ln of 1.005, close bracket, and equals. And you should now get 201.7338784. Okay, so don't be afraid to press equals. All right, well that wraps everything up. So hopefully now you can see how those steps that I've summarized down for what to do for AN questions now can link in with the AN question for the N question itself, okay? So in your exam tomorrow, the HSC is, just remember those steps there, okay? So finding n, you've got an, sn, denominator, expand brackets, like terms, and log, okay? Sit there and say that 7 times over and quiz yourself and get yourself to remember those things, okay? That rounds up the 6 for a band 6. Trust me, if you know those 6 video contents very well, you can get a band 6 in this course. Good luck to everyone in the HSC exam tomorrow.